Hello and welcome to Mental Health Hour. I'm Dr. Tapo. Happy to be back after a short break. I hope everyone is doing well. We had the solar eclipse here in parts of Canada. I'm not sure if it's all of Canada, but I live in Niagara region that was supposed to be like the absolutely best vantage point. People had, were throwing parties in parking lots, and hotels were charging up to $1,000 per room. And so there was a lot of hype here, specifically in Niagara region, about the solar eclipse. And then yesterday came and it was so overcast. We couldn't see anything, at least where I was. We couldn't see anything at all. There was just clouds everywhere. But it was dark for like a couple of minutes and it passed. So it was a bit anticlimactic, I would say, and I live here, so I didn't spend anything, but to think there's people that traveled and spent money to come to Niagara region, and a lot of people didn't actually get to look up at the eclipse itself, but we did experience that momentary darkness, and it just reflecting on that and some of the expectations we have in life. We tend to build things up quite a lot in our heads, and we've been talking about codependency. We've been talking about relationships. We've been talking about just even things like mindfulness and being in the moment. And it made me really think about some of those things we build up in our heads. And then we invest in people that are not worth investing in, or in situations that simply because of our fantasies about these things or these people. So yesterday, I think, was a really, for me, a reflective moment, when you build things up so much that when the reality comes, it like you suffer a loss. You actually suffer a loss because what you imagined it would be or would come, and you put so much time, so much money, so much effort into something, and unfortunately you don't get to experience what you thought you would. And it also makes us think about then how do we react or respond to those losses in our lives, especially if we're talking about relationships. We've had a number of people write in and talk about failed relationships and all of that. And recently I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's been divorced or separated, I'm not sure which, for a very long time, had 3 children with this man. And she was confiding that sometimes she just goes through these moments of what feels like grief. And it's not that she hasn't forgiven and moved on, but what it is we grieve the things that we had hoped for as much as we grieve the things that we actually had. We grieve the things that never happened the way we hoped they would, the way we wanted them to. And we need to understand that that grief is important and it should be acknowledged and allowed. Let's not fight it. Let's not stifle it. Let's not try and repress it. When relationships end, we grieve what they might have been if they had continued, if they had been healthy, if they had been good. And so yesterday just brought that to mind for me. I hope other people did get to see an actual eclipse. Over here where I was, and I tried to take pictures, but I did get those couple of minutes of darkness. It was pretty eerie, pretty freakish. Dogs started howling and barking, and like the animals and other species, it felt like they had been anticipating the eclipse for a while as well. It was interesting in any case. So I hope everybody is doing well. I hope that we are looking after ourselves and each other. I always encourage compassion for those of us who need it, and for ourselves. We've been talking about like even self-worth and self-esteem and some of those, self-validation as well, and looking at how we can nurture that within ourselves, a little more, so that when we do get those hard knocks in life, we have that resiliency. We're able to bounce back. We're able to cope, because sometimes it's how we cope with the situation that matters rather than the situation itself. Because there's some things that are inevitable in life. There's some things that catch us completely by surprise, but are we able to cope? Or do those events and situations completely destroy us? And we said that that's really what self-esteem is about. It doesn't mean we don't get tired, we don't get down, we don't feel those hard knocks. We do all of that, but we're able to bounce back fairly healthy and in healthy ways. So these are some of the things that we've been talking about these past several weeks. And before I go any further, just a reminder that the Mental Health Hour is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not here to replace your physician, your therapist, other service providers. I really am just here to offer you some information that will help you make an informed decision. And my thanks always goes out to the Love Bay family, the founders of Love Bay Radio, and everybody else working behind the scenes to provide us with this platform and this opportunity to talk and to commune and to build each other up. So much love to Love Bay Radio's founders and everybody working behind the scenes. Thank you so much for this platform. You can get in touch with us, send us your questions, your comments, share some of your experiences, whatever wisdom you have gained along the way. Please write in, let us know, share with us so we can educate each other, we can help each other grow and succeed in life. Text us on 437-778-3299, 437-778-3299, or email infolovebay@gmail.com, infoluvbay@gmail.com. And thanks to the people that have sent in their questions, their comments, their opinions. We like to hear people's opinions. We don't necessarily always agree with them, but feel free to share your opinions, because that's how we enrich our learning and our conversations. And sometimes what comes as opinions is really an indicator of where we are not as knowledgeable as we should be. I think we've talked, not at length, but just a little bit here and there, the stigma around mental health. And a lot of that comes from people being misinformed, people not understanding the mental health system or sector, people not understanding even diagnosis and all of that. And so when you write into us, whether you're wrong or right, it offers us that opportunity to learn from each other. So please do get in touch. Send your questions, your comments, your experiences. Let's build each other up on Love Bay Radio's Mental Health Hour. Okay, so let's go into our questions. And if I don't read your question today, because I think there's quite a number of them, I will get to them next week. So just keep them coming in. And remember, if you miss any sessions, they are available online. If you follow Love Bay, even if you follow me, Dr. Tapo, I'm sure you can find me somewhere. You might be able to access some of the past sessions and kind of get caught up, so you're not lagging behind the rest of the class. All right. Okay, so today I'm going to start. Okay, so I'll start with Anonymous from Toronto. And this person is responding to something I said a while back. I mentioned that I recently was at an event where we talked about mental health and the workplace, and an interesting statistic that I learned that came to light for me was that the respondents of a specific survey, and I'm sorry I don't have the details of which survey it is exactly, about 70% of the people that responded to that survey indicated that their boss, their supervisor, their employer, 70% of people said that their boss, their employer, their supervisor has a lot more impact on their mental health than anything else, than their spouses, their parents, their cats, their dogs, the mice in the attic. And so this person is writing in response to that, because I commented, I am a boss, I am an employer. And when I look at the people that work for me, and alongside me, to think that that is how much impact I have on their mental health, it's a huge responsibility. But at the same time, after that, I kind of sat back and reflected and looked back at my experience again as an employer, a boss, a supervisor, and how my colleagues, my subordinates, people who report to me, people who work for me, the impact they have had on my mental health. And to be honest, stress. I've experienced periods of high levels of stress because of people working for me. So I do think it kind of works both ways. And so that's why in your workplaces, when you talk about mental health, it should be a discussion at all levels, and solutions should come from all levels as well. Sometimes we have this expectation that, well, you're the employer, you're the boss, fix this. But that's not how relationships work, even relationships at work. You have a responsibility as much as your employer or your boss. So anyway, this person in Toronto wrote in and said, my workplace is beyond toxic. And they wrote toxic in all caps. So we understand that, like, they mean toxic. So this person says, my workplace is beyond toxic. It is horrid. And horrid is also in caps. So we get it. It's a horrible, horrid, toxic place. And this person said, it took such a serious toll on my mental health. I took almost a year off. That's a long period of time to take away from work. But we're seeing more and more of this. We're seeing more and more people needing to step away from their careers and their jobs and workplaces due to mental health. When I went back, this person continues, when I went back, it was a different landscape. The majority of my co-workers had either quit, got a job in a different department, or left. 2 colleagues asked why I would go back to that hell. This supervisor, so I'm understanding that there's a specific supervisor who made that workplace toxic and horrid. And this supervisor has a boss. So the supervisor reports to somebody else who knows that she's a terror, but this boss to the supervisor does nothing about it. I am off work again because I told her the building will always remain but one day we all have to leave the building. Thank God for a good husband. Otherwise, I would be soliciting your services to keep sane. 70% seems right. So thank God for your good husband. I like when people give props to their good spouses. I think we get so many messages where we are frustrated and annoyed and disappointed by our spouses. So it's nice that for this person, they have a good husband, so a good support system. And yeah, 70% seems right. And like I said, as a boss, as an employer myself, it works both ways. And I don't know why the boss to the supervisor isn't doing anything. Sometimes employees, it's really up to us to lodge those formal complaints so that something can be done. But I've been in workplaces before when I was employed in different environments where a lot of secret conversations were happening. Nothing was being discussed out in the open. And so when we have those kinds of environments where there's gossip, there's hearsay, nobody's properly speaking out or using the policies and procedures to lodge complaints and all of that, it gets worse and worse because nobody's being open and nobody's focusing on solutions. We're all complaining behind closed doors, we're gossiping, we're like, and that is really what makes the workplace toxic. Because you can imagine you have one person that you're saying has impacted so many people to the point that they're quitting. But you'd be surprised that you go to that same workplace and nobody has ever lodged a formal complaint. Nobody has ever had an open and honest conversation. But a lot of what is happening is gossip, toxic side discussions, and all sorts of drama, but no honesty, no transparency, no solution focused dialogue. And that's why I'm saying it's not just up to an employer. We're all responsible for our workplace. And it makes a difference if you can then say, well, I did this and still nothing was done. I always say the difference between complaining and bringing something up is what you actually do about it. If you are someone who is given to complain, you will always point out the problems, never try and offer solutions, never try and engage in any solution focused work. Your job is to just always complain. And we don't need those kind of people. We need people that want to work on solutions, that wants to fix problems. Like once you've identified there's a problem, who are you leaving it for? If you're not doing it, but you see that there's a problem, then you're contributing to the toxicity of your workplace. So I encourage people in these types of situations to speak up, to look for solutions. And honestly, writing a formal complaint is looking for a solution because you're highlighting this is a problem. And no boss can ignore that. They cannot ignore that. They are obligated to respond. Read your policies and procedures. I was speaking with a group recently, and the matter of racism and discrimination at work came up. And one of the women there asked, like, but what do I do? I said, go to your policies and procedures. Every workplace has one. And in those policies and procedures, it should outline this is how you make a complaint. And once you've made a complaint, this is what whoever you lodge the complaint to is expected to do. That's what policies and procedures are for. They're not just something that you engage with at orientation and then never ever touch. And the next thing you find, you've lost your job or you've quit your job or what, but you didn't follow the policies and procedures. They are tools for you to co-create a safe and healthy workplace. Mental health uh, is a health and safety concern in the workplace. It absolutely is. And I'm happy to tell you that a lot of the employers that I engage with, because I do some consultancy on the side, have recognized this and put things in place to treat mental health as a health and safety issue. The same way, if somebody is mopping the floor, you have to put up that sign that shows that, listen, this floor is wet. There are things that your employer is obligated to do once you speak up. So I'm encouraging people who have been complaining behind closed doors. You're part of the gossip circle. You can't wait to see each other on Monday morning because of what happened on Friday, but you are not working on solutions. That will not benefit anyone at all. We're all responsible for our workplace. Okay? All right. So another email here. This is an interesting one. Okay, so this writer from Sioux Lookout, I'm not sure where that is actually. We have Sault Ste. Marie here in Ontario, but this is Sioux Lookout. I'm not sure where that is. But anyway, this person writes in, is there such a thing as invisible love, non-spoken love? My boyfriend of a year and a half is very attentive, caring, and thoughtful, but he never says, I love you. The things he does say it all. I got a cold 2 weeks ago. He came over with oranges, Buckleys, and 2 boxes of tissues. And then this writer says, Bob Marley says actions speak louder than words. But sometimes I'm confused. I need to hear him say the words, I love you. Okay, so invisible love, it doesn't sound like it's invisible. From what you're saying, it's absolutely visible. He's doing all these things. He's attentive, caring, thoughtful. To me, those are visible things. You have seen it with your eyes. But what you're looking for are probably words of affirmation. Now, it's been a long, long time since I read the 5 love languages, so I honestly can't be quoting from that with any, I'll say, level of authority. But from what I do remember, people express their love in different ways. And sometimes people grow up in environments where saying I love you wasn't done. Remember, we learn to love from our primary, I'll say, family. Those people that socialized you in your, as a baby, as a toddler, as an adolescent, and all. That's where we first learn how to love. And there are people from families where it's not said, but it's demonstrated in the most amazing ways. If you can see what he is doing, allow him the grace to learn how to say it. And what I mean about that is have a conversation where you express that hearing it is as important to you as seeing it. And start off by like what you acknowledging the attention, caring, and thoughtfulness that he has demonstrated, and ask for that affirmation verbally as well. And it might take him time even after you've had that conversation. Sometimes we have a conversation with someone and we want to see immediate change. But allow people to grow into some of the things that we need and expect from them. And it's important to always express those needs and expectations so that they know. Sometimes we're sitting there and we just talked about these silent people in workplaces. We have silent people in relationships. You're seething, you're getting frustrated, but you've never actually said anything, or the way you've said it is so aggressive or passive aggressive that it doesn't really encourage the person. It makes them feel very self-conscious, very judged, unappreciated, a lot of other things. So if this is about your love language, I encourage you to read that book, maybe even read it together. If you're not readers, like a lot of young people these days, maybe you prefer to listen. I'm sure there's podcasts, there's audible volumes of the same book. Work on understanding each other before concluding that it's something impossible. The point of long-term relationships is you grow in love. There's a lot of things that I'm sure you and he are doing now that you weren't doing the first 3 months of your relationship, or even the first year of your relationship. You grow into certain things through vulnerability and discussions and experimentation. Let him experiment with different. Does it compliment you the way you look? If you dress up, does it compliment you? Stuff like that. And slowly build towards what that need is. But also, if it's something that he doesn't become that good at, sometimes we need to model it. In my experience, in most healthy relationships, if you say, I love you, the person says, I love you back. Maybe the problem is he never says it first. But like I said, from what you're saying, his love is very, very visible. But you want it to be audible. So have that conversation and have it with grace and compassion for who he is and what he has been trying to do. Don't shortchange that. Because there are some people who will tell you, I love you 24/7, but their actions are quite the opposite. And they're saying it because that's oh, she expects me to say I love you. So yeah, I love you, but they're never there when you need them. They're cheating on you, they are abusing you, they are doing all sorts of things, but they're very, very quick to say I love you. So I think you and your boyfriend of a year and a half have some talking to do, some growing together to do, some appreciating to do as well, and some negotiating. But do it with love and grace and give him time to grow into that. Okay? All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, this is very kind. Someone from the Bronx, New York. I don't know how to pronounce it. Galine from the Bronx, New York. Thank you so much for this. Says, I celebrate you, me. Or he or she or they are celebrating me as a Black woman and doing this great program every Tuesday, helping not just women, but people in general. And they say Happy Women's Month and congratulations. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And then I shared a while ago an experience I had with a therapist in Jamaica who called me babe at one point, kept uh, uh, commenting. They were compliments, but I just took them as comments about my looks, which had absolutely nothing to do with the reason why I was in therapy. And we have a writer from Jamaica saying, I'm glad you didn't go back to that therapist. Sometimes the therapists themselves need therapy. It's true. I am a therapist myself, and I've needed therapy at different points in my life. It's kind of difficult sometimes because I am a therapist. I know what to expect. I know what is wrong. And maybe if I wasn't a therapist and this male therapist was commenting on my looks, I might have taken it as a compliment and felt affirmed or valid. I don't know. But it's not your therapist's job to be commenting on your looks, saying things like, oh, and you're so cute. You're a beautiful woman. And your therapist might do that, but if it makes you uncomfortable, rightly so. Okay? So it's okay to tell your therapist if something makes you uncomfortable, especially if you feel like it's a right fit. For me, with that gentleman therapist, it wasn't a good fit. So I didn't honestly even bother with that feedback. I just moved on. I let him know that I'm going to look for a different therapist. And I've had therapists that they see my name, they Google me in advance of the therapy, which I, as a therapist and as a client, I find that unethical, because when a client comes for therapy, it should be up to them what they want to share. But when you see your client's name, and before you meet them, before they can share whatever, and you've already gone on Google, on their LinkedIn, on their social media, you've gathered all this information, and then they come for the first time. And for me, what happened was, this therapist, it was a woman, says to me, I, you're a therapist, and I feel like you have so much more experience than me, and I feel like I should be learning from you. Again, not what I want from my therapist, but they saw my name, went and Googled me. So already by the time we had that first session, our relationship was already impacted. So these are just some pointers I'm giving you in terms of your own therapeutic journey. I think it's unethical for a therapist to Google a client, whether it's at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. A client is supposed to bring what they want to bring and not have you doing research on them. And because right away, for me, what happened was, this therapist just decided they couldn't help me because of my level of experience as a therapist. And maybe they could have helped me if they hadn't Googled me. I don't tell my therapists that I'm a therapist, because that's neither here nor there. I go for therapy because I have some mental health issue or some life stressor that I need support with. My being a therapist has nothing to do with it. So I don't normally tell people, I don't fill out the form as Dr. Tapo. I just put my name as I want them to address me, and I hope to get the help that I need. So if you are in therapy, planning on going for therapy, hope to go for therapy, these are just some of the things you want to be able to be open and honest with your therapist. So sometimes what happens is clients lie. Okay. A lot of times, especially with clients with addictions, or maybe they've been mandated by the court to go for therapy, they lie. You ask them a question like, how many times per week do you drink? And they say, just once. But if you just drink once and it's just one beer once a week, and sometimes I go for months without drinking at all, then why are you seeking addictions counseling? You understand? So sometimes for us therapists, what that means is we have to work with them where they are. So a client tells me a lie that doesn't add up to why they referred. Sometimes there are forms that have been filled out in the first place in the referral and stuff like that, and they start off by lying. Sometimes clients do that because They are afraid, they are anxious, they are uncomfortable, they don't want to be judged, they don't want to be seen in a bad light. Sometimes they're just desperate for a space where they're not the villain or the bad person, and they're seeing their therapist as that place. And that is part of the process of therapy. The hope is, as the therapist and client build a relationship, that client will eventually let their guard down and be honest. But I've had clients that I can see for 12 weeks and they're still lying because that's what they need to do. And for me as a therapist, I consider that a symptom or part of their pathology. It's like if a pathological liar comes to therapy, you don't expect them to tell the truth. They're going to lie. Person with antisocial behavior, they're most likely to lie. Borderline personality disorder, they're most likely to lie. People with addictions, all sorts of things, anger problems, they'll likely underplay some of the outbursts and violence that they have engaged in. A lot of clients will lie. But the hope is at some point they let go of those defenses and are open and honest so they can get the help that actually works for them. So therapy is really a complicated space. It's a complicated space. And for some of us, that's the reason why we don't want to be in that space. We're already seeing a million things that could go wrong, so we don't even go there. Some of us, we're the ones who are lying to our therapists and we know it. So eventually you just stop going because you're like, I keep lying anyway. What's the point? Listen, you get out of therapy honestly what you want out of it. And if you're not getting what you want out of it, it's maybe a bad fit with the therapist or the model that they're using. There are hundreds of models and ways. Most therapists use a hybrid or some kind of compound of different models. But when you go for therapy, and something I ask my clients is, what do you want out of this? Like, what has brought you here? What are you looking to get? Establish those expectations early on, evaluate them as you go. But you are just, it looks like we keep coming back to this. You are equally responsible for that space. Because some people, especially those that have been mandated, right? You're forced to go because maybe you were caught drinking and driving or something like that. Or your children have been taken away from you because you smacked one of them or something. So the court mandates you to go for therapy. And so you turn up, and in your head, you're like, I'm just going to turn up, do the 6 hours that the court demanded, and then I'm out. So you're coming there, and for your therapist, it's like pulling teeth. And then after you've been all petulant and disagreeable and uncooperative, you then come to your therapist and say, write me a letter. I've had people do that because often when it's court mandated, they want some kind of confirmation from a therapist that this person has been going for therapy. I am telling you, if you're that person, you've been mandated to go, and your idea is, I'll just go, and you're lying and you're being rude and you're being all of that. As a therapist, I'll just write in the letter that, yeah, we didn't get anywhere. I don't think this client was ready for it. Maybe they need to find a different therapist, but they were not ready and we didn't go anywhere. Therapy is, it's something you have to be committed to get something out of it. There's people that will cancel over and over again, and they're not ready. If you're canceling, finding excuses, doing this, you're not ready for it. Don't go there. Go when you're ready. When you're ready to be open and honest, not only in giving your therapist the information they need to help you, but also in what the therapist suggests. Okay, so as a therapist, you come with a problem. This is what's been happening. Da, da, da. I'm going to offer you some feedback, the same way that I've been doing, like here on Love Bay Radio, and people write in. And again, let me be clear: I am not doing therapy on the Mental Health Hour. I am providing information. So the same way you write to me on Mental Health Hour, some of your letters are like a bit worrying and disturbing. I will say to you, this is a bit worrying and disturbing. The therapist is going to do that. They're not there to just make you feel good by telling you what you want to hear. They will make you feel good by telling you what you need to hear. And sometimes it's the fact that, listen, these things you've been doing, you are wrong. You need to apologize. You need to do this. You need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to let this go. You need whatever it is you need to hear is what the therapist will tell. And you have to be willing and open to that for therapy to make a difference. So thank you to our writer in Saint Mary, Jamaica. Yeah, therapists sometimes need help themselves. And I'll be honest, like, apart from this guy calling me babe and complimenting me, and he did tell me some things that were hard to hear. And I would have gone back to therapy with him if that's all he had done. But unfortunately, he just, yeah. Okay, moving on. We're in Albany, New York. So we've gone back to New York. Oh, okay. So this person says, I like the way you always tell us to seek help from the right people. Yes, absolutely. It's not just every helper who is actually helpful to you. So this person says, I like the way you always tell us to seek help from the right person. I went to church. I went to my church pastor, okay, to get help with my failing marriage before I realized he himself is a serial cheater. Oh my goodness. Okay. I was new to the church, heard rumors about his behavior, but paid no attention to it. I have since then left the church and I'm receiving help from a licensed therapist. So here's the thing about counseling at church, mosque, wherever. We have pastors who may or may not have gone to theological school, Bible school, or whatever it's called, to actually become a pastor. In this day and age, we have so many people who simply set up a tent and call themselves a pastor. No one has vetted them. No one has trained them. No one has mentored them. They've simply decided, you know what, I have a calling. There's a corner over there, and they pitch their tent, put up a sign, and they've become a pastor. Is that the person to go to when you have issues, mental health issues? Probably not. Probably not. Now, I'm not saying don't go to your church elders and pastors and whatever, but here in North America, let me say here in Canada, Ontario specifically, a person can't call themselves a therapist or a counselor without actually registering with a regulating college. So even if they're at your church, they cannot advertise themselves as a therapist or counselor unless they're registered. So if you're in the province of Ontario, you can actually go on the register, and that's at crpo.ca. Google a person's name, and then you will know if they're properly registered or not. So even if they are a pastor or a counselor at your church, look them up on that register. I'm not saying go on their Instagram and their YouTube channel and their TikTok and all that. No, look them up if you're in a province or a place where there's some kind of register of therapists, counselors, clinical psychologists, physicians, all that. We're all registered with regulated colleges. So look them up. So that's one way to figure out who's the right person. Another thing is we go to church for our spiritual selves, and we've talked about that spiritual aspect does have an impact on our mental health. But we also need to be, especially if you're new to a congregation or new to a space. I've said this before. Don't be so quick to share intimate details about yourself with strangers, even if they're in that position of, hey, I'm a pastor or whatever. So with a therapist, you refer yourself to me, I'm a stranger, you don't. But if I do anything wrong, so I gave the example of that therapist who called me babe and all that, I can actually write to their college and report them for doing that. And that college will take care of it. So I would be more comfortable talking to a registered therapist because I know if they do anything that is harmful to me, I have recourse. I can write to the college, I can lodge a complaint. But like I said, with some of these pastors, they pitched their own tent and they'll tell you their boss is God. So they're not even being accountable to anyone. And then you go and tell them intimate details about yourself. We want to trust our clergy, our pastors. Like, I'm a Christian, I've said that before. I'm an absolute Christian. And I have great respect and reverence for people who serve in churches. But I am not going to tell them intimate things about me until I know well enough that this is safe. Because the structures of some churches is there is no accountability. That same pastor that there's rumors, they're a serial cheater, people in the congregation know, and other cheaters feel very comfortable in that church because, well, our pastor's a cheater, I'm a cheater, let's all be cheaters and praise Jesus. Who are they being accountable to? We have to be careful who we take our mental health issues to. Even within our families, I've said this before, they love us, they are well-meaning, but they are not the right person to help us. And we've all had that parent, that sibling, that aunt or uncle or cousin or whoever, we tell them a problem and they take it into their own hands and they make it worse. And it's not because they don't love you. They absolutely love you. They are just simply not equipped to help. Look for a person who is equipped to help. Okay? That's very, very important because sometimes we go to people and we're setting them up. We know deep down inside that telling my grandmother this thing is, I'm just setting her up. Why are you telling her? She loves you absolutely, but is she equipped? Is she the right person to tell her that I'm having problems with this and that? And church folk, we're quick to say everything is a demon, right? And we'll pray for you. Like I said, I'm Christian. I've been in churches where I remember years ago, I was having marital issues with my now ex-husband, and I went to and they patted me on the back and said, we'll pray for you. And that was about it. Nobody followed up. I wasn't offered even any proper counseling or anything. And I was a very young bride at the time. Church, sometimes, I'm sorry, but it's not the best place if you're looking for counseling. If you're looking for prayer, absolutely. If you're looking for teaching on the word, absolutely. If you think you have clinical depression, go to your physician. Once your physician has diagnosed you and all of that, now you're like, okay, now I know what's going on. Then take it to your church and say, my kin and church folk, please pray for me. It's like with cancer. You don't go to your, well, some people do. Okay. I was going to say, you don't go to your pastor and say, I have cancer, please pray that the cancer, and you don't actually see a doctor. Yes, you tell your pastor you have cancer, but you go to the doctor and you go to the hospital and they treat you. I know there's some religions and sects and doctrines where they don't believe in modern medicine. It's up to you. But go to the people best equipped to help with your mental health issues, even with your marital issues, right? Sometimes as therapists, people bring things to us that we're not equipped. And the ethical thing to do is to say, listen, I wish I could help with this, but I don't have enough information and experience around this issue to help you. I heard somewhere recently, someone, I think it was a preacher actually, saying something like, you have marital problems and you go to your therapist who's been divorced 3 times and you think they'll help you save your marriage. To this, I will say yes. If they're equipped, and sometimes it's through their horrible experiences, they now know what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, right? If they're the best person equipped, your pastor might have been married for 50 years to that one Mrs. First Lady, whatever. But they might not necessarily be equipped to help you with your marriage. Go to the best person equipped and vet that person. Your pastor, your deacon, the prophet and bishop, whatever it is, ask questions to establish, is this the right person, before you start spilling your guts to the wrong person, because it can make a situation worse. And the sad part is, some of them don't even keep those things confidential. You confide in them, and then the whole congregation now knows, because your first lady, your pastor, your bishop, the deacon, whoever, blabbermouth, love to gossip. I'm just saying, vet the people you tell your issues and problems to. If you're genuinely looking for a solution, look for the person best equipped to help. It doesn't matter how much they love you. If they are not equipped, it's not going to help. So don't burden them with things that they can't do anything about. Okay. So that's my response to that one. So that leaves us with one for this week. And this is from Olivia in the Netherlands, who says, going back to our topic on codependencies, says codependencies in relationships can be toxic. Okay. So codependence in relationships are toxic, not can be, they are. Codependency is never a good thing. It's not healthy. It is toxic. So it's not can be toxic. Absolutely, they are. And if you're in a relationship that feels toxic, vet it, examine it for codependency. Chances are it's there, it's happening. And so Olivia says that they're happy that I touched on it. And then they're saying, unpack these 3 types of codependencies. So they've identified the fixer, the controller, and the apathetic. So I'm looking at our time. We have just 6 minutes left. And what I will say to our listener in the Netherlands, I'll start with you next week, looking at some of those, rather than calling them the, and I know some sources do, I will look at those as characteristics in people who are codependent. Why? Because it's not often that cut and dry, that the fixer simply just tries to fix everything or the controller simply tries to control everything. These things are complex and dynamic. And what sometimes happens in codependent relationships is they adapt. So in one relationship, because of who they're in a relationship with, they're a controller. And then that relationship ends, they enter into another one, they become a fixer. And the thing is, often what is happening is, as relationships break down and crumble, they learn to adapt. And so in the next relationship, some patterns are maintained, but new behaviors might also, like from a psychological perspective, like we talk about conditioning, which is how human beings learn certain behaviors, learn, like even on a physiological level. If you've heard of Pavlov and his dog, and that was classic conditioning. And then we have operant conditioning, which is more about the behavior. And here I think it was Thorndike and Skinner. These are the psychologists, you can Google them, who were prominent around this research. So what happens is people adapt, but they adapt to maintain the codependency. So if they've been in 3 codependent relationships where they were the controller, and then they see, okay, me being the controller, they adapt. What will keep this codependent relationship? So it doesn't always look the same. A lot of it has to do with what happened in the previous relationship, what worked and didn't work, who they are now in a relationship with, right? So they adapt. So next week, I will start with your question, Olivia, in the Netherlands, and talk about these characteristics or elements of codependency, rather than saying this is the person. Because if we use those boxes and start putting people in boxes, we miss a lot when they don't fit into that box, but they're still codependent, they're still antisocial, they're still depressed or anxious or whatever it is. And I've said this before, some of what goes wrong with mental health care is misdiagnosis, because we're looking to tick the same old boxes, and we know culturally things look different. It's difficult to be a controller if you are coming from, as a woman, for example, if you're coming from a culture where women are not allowed to control. So you become a fixer or apathetic or a people pleaser, whatever it is. And culture has a lot to do with what elements or behaviors and characteristics we see of codependency, right? So we'll start there next week. And I think I've covered most of the questions from this week. Please write to us, text us 437-778-3299, or email infolovebay@gmail.com. Share your experiences, ask your questions, offer your opinions or advice. We'll take what we can as we learn and grow together. It's springtime here in Ontario, so the weather has been a lot better. No snow, I would say, in the last week or so, although we've had some freezing temperatures. I envy those of you in sunny and tropical locations around the globe. The sun does a lot for our moods. You know, sometimes we talk about why are Caribbean people always happy, or why are African people always happy, and so forth. And the sun has a lot to do with it, and beautiful beaches and trees and lovely nature and all of that. So those of you in those types of locations, send us some love here as we eagerly wait for a bright summer in Ontario, Canada. Be good to yourselves, be kind to yourselves and to each other. Again, it's really important that we let kindness and compassion for each other. At the end of the day, whatever our weaknesses, whatever our pain, whatever our suffering, even whatever our wrongs and our sins against each other, let's be kind and compassionate. Forgive each other, forgive ourselves, and self-care. I know you guys love talking about self-care, like it's always a popular topic, self-care. But let's care for each other as well. Thank you for spending the last hour with me here on Love Bay Radio Mental Health Hour. I'm Dr. Tapo, and I hope to spend more time with you next week.